If you walked into a grocery store today and felt like your wallet was quietly being robbed at the checkout line, you are not wrong. And what is coming in the months ahead is going to make today's prices look like a discount sale you wish you had taken full advantage of while you still had the chance. Right now, in June 2026, a combination of forces is pressing down on the global food supply simultaneously. And the 12 everyday products caught in the middle of this storm are ones your family almost certainly uses every single week. This is not a political story. This is not speculation. This is what the data is showing right now, and understanding it clearly before the next round of price adjustments hits the shelf is one of the most practical and powerful things you can do for your household. The USDA forecasts that overall food prices will rise 3.4% in 2026, with grocery prices expected to climb 3.2%, above their long-run historical average, and grocery prices were already 2.9% higher in April 2026 than a year earlier, with a 0.7% jump from March alone, one of the steepest monthly increases since 2022. That monthly jump is the number that should concern you because it tells you the acceleration is not slowing down, it is speeding up. Let us start with beef, because beef is where the story of structural food inflation becomes impossible to ignore. Beef and veal prices are projected to surge 6.3% in 2026, building on the 12.17% increase already recorded in March 2026 compared to the previous year, and the continued price pressure stems from a cyclical contraction of the U.S. cattle herd that has been reducing supplies since 2019, while consumer demand remains strong despite higher costs. Food economist Dr. Ortega of Michigan State University explained that severe drought conditions in recent years forced ranchers to scale back herd sizes. Because drought made it more costly for producers to maintain livestock, so many reduced their herds, including animals needed to grow future supply. That is a multi-year problem with a multi-year recovery timeline, which means beef is not getting cheaper anytime soon. Coffee is the second product, and this one is hitting household budgets across every income level. Arabica coffee futures surged approximately 70% over the last 12 months. Peaking at historic highs near $4.40 per pound, as Brazil's critical growing region suffered prolonged drought followed by unseasonal frost and hail events in mid-2025 that decimated the flowering process for the 2026 harvest. In Vietnam, the world's leading producer of Robusta beans used in instant coffee and espresso blends, record-breaking heat waves in early 2025 shriveled crops, followed by Typhoon Kalmegi in late 2025, which brought torrential rains during peak harvest and caused a 20% decline in yield, sending Robusta prices to nearly double their historical averages. The third product is olive oil, and its price journey over recent years is one of the most dramatic in modern food history. Multi-year drought across Spain and southern Europe drove wholesale olive oil prices to record highs, and retail prices for premium and even mid-tier olive oil doubled in many markets between 2022 and 2025. Cumulative data shows olive oil has already seen price rises of over 113% compared to levels at the start of the cost of living crisis in mid-2021, with further sharp rises expected as conflict in the Middle East pushes energy costs higher across supply chains. The fourth product is spices, which rarely get the headline attention they deserve, but represent one of the most import-dependent categories in your entire grocery cart. Every major spice crossing an international border faces freight costs, tariff exposure, and currency volatility, all of which have moved against the consumer over the past several years and show no signs of reversing. The fifth product rounding out this first group is canned tomatoes, which experienced a 40% price spike in April 2026 year over year, driven by cold weather reducing domestic supply and steel tariffs adding permanent cost to every can on the shelf. These five products together prove one undeniable point. The foods your family relies on most are being repriced for a more expensive future. And the window to prepare affordably is open right now, but it will not stay open forever. Now we move into the next group of products on this list, and this is where the conversation gets truly unsettling for anyone who thought the solution to rising meat and coffee prices was simply to fall back on cheaper, shelf-stable basics, because those basics are under enormous pressure too, and understanding exactly why is critical to making smart decisions for your household before the next round of increases locks in permanently. Let us begin with honey, because what is happening to honey right now is one of the most alarming stories in the entire food system, and most people have no idea it is unfolding. Between April 2024 and April 2025, beekeepers in the United States lost an estimated 55.6% of their managed colonies, the highest annual loss rate ever recorded since tracking began in 2010. Read that number again. More than half of all managed honeybee colonies in the entire country died in a single year. Commercial beekeepers lost an average of 62% of their colonies between June 2024 and March 2025, surpassing the typical 30 to 50% average annual losses that had already been considered alarming by experts. With the economic impact estimated to surpass $600 million in honey production, pollination income, and the cost of replacing colonies. The primary driver is the Varroa destructor mite, which has now developed resistance to the most widely used treatment, meaning beekeepers no longer have a reliable weapon to fight back with. As a direct result, honey prices hit $3.05 per pound in 2025, up 27%, while yield per colony averaged just 40 ppb. Story the 8 pounds, down 7%. And beekeepers themselves say the price still does not cover the actual cost of production. With fuel costs rising, drought reducing nectar availability, and no near-term solution to the mite resistance crisis, 2026 is shaping up to be another devastating year for domestic honey supply, which means consumers will feel this at the shelf whether they are tracking it or not. Dry beans are next, and they matter for a reason that connects directly to everything happening with beef prices. When meat becomes too expensive, families pivot to plant-based protein. And for generations, that pivot has led straight to black beans, kidney beans, lentils, and chickpeas, the cheapest and most reliable source of calories and nutrition in the entire grocery store. But that pivot is now running into the same supply chain headwinds affecting every other food category. Fertilizer costs have remained elevated because fertilizer production is deeply tied to natural gas prices, and energy markets are being squeezed by ongoing geopolitical instability. Freight costs have not normalized to pre-pandemic levels. Tariff exposure on imported agricultural products has baked permanent cost increases into the wholesale price of legumes crossing any international border. The window where dry beans served as a near-zero-cost protein option is quietly narrowing, and families who stock up on dried bulk beans now are locking in today's prices before the next adjustment hits. Powdered milk is the product that most people overlook entirely until a supply disruption makes it impossible to find. And that oversight represents a genuine vulnerability for any household trying to maintain food security. The FAO Food Price Index reported that dairy prices rose 1.2% in March 2026 alone, the first increase since July 2025, driven by higher prices for skim milk powder, butter, and whole milk powder simultaneously. Powdered milk delivers protein, calcium, and calories in a format that stores for years without refrigeration, making it one of the most practical and undervalued items any family can keep on hand. As fresh dairy prices climb and supply chains continue to face energy-related disruptions, powdered milk transitions from an emergency novelty into a genuinely essential household staple. Then there is rice, which feeds more than half the world's population and is now caught inside a volatile pricing environment driven by forces converging from multiple directions at once. The FAO All Rice Price Index increased 2.7% in May 2026 alone, with weather concerns and higher crude oil prices underpinning quotations in major Asian exporting countries, while world wheat prices rose for the fourth consecutive month, supported by smaller expected harvests and higher fuel and fertilizer costs, adding further upward pressure globally. The ongoing geopolitical tensions affecting the Strait of Hormuz have disrupted the flow of crude oil and key agricultural inputs, including fertilizers, and the overall outlook for rice markets in 2026 depends heavily on geopolitical stability, weather patterns, and timely policy responses from major exporting nations. Finally, pasta closes out this group, and its story is inseparable from the wheat market pressure building underneath it. Pasta prices have already risen approximately 50% compared to levels at the start of the cost of living crisis in mid-2021, and further sharp rises are expected as conflict in the Middle East pushes energy and input costs higher across global supply chains. Pasta is calorie-dense, endlessly versatile, and shelf-stable for years, which makes the steady erosion of its affordability one of the most direct and daily felt consequences of everything happening in the global food system right now. We have now arrived at the final two products on this list, cooking oil and oats, and together they deliver the clearest and most urgent message of everything covered in this video. Because these are the products that represent the last affordable line of defense for millions of household budgets. And right now, that line is being pressed from every direction at once, with no sign of relief on the horizon. Start with cooking oil, because the data here is not subtle. The FAO Vegetable Oil Price Index averaged 193.9 points in April 2026, rising 5.9% from March alone and reaching its highest level since July 2022, with the continued increase driven by higher prices of palm, soy, sunflower, and rapeseed oils simultaneously. As international palm oil prices rose for the fifth consecutive month, underpinned by stronger anticipated demand from the biofuel sector, policy incentives in producing countries, and higher crude oil prices. What makes this particularly significant is that these four oils, palm, soy, sunflower, and rapeseed, are the substitutes for each other. When one rises, budget-conscious consumers and food manufacturers normally shift to the cheaper alternative. But when all four rise together at the same time, driven by the same underlying energy and geopolitical pressures, there is no escape route left. The effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has continued pushing up energy and fertilizer prices, and the FAO Food Price Index recorded a third consecutive monthly increase in April 2026, driven by higher costs across vegetable oils, meat, and cereals as supply chains absorb the ongoing disruption. Every bottle of cooking oil sitting on your store shelf right now, whether it is vegetable blend, canola, sunflower, or soybean, has been touched by this chain of pressure, and the cost is moving in one direction only. Then there are oats, and oats deserve more respect in this conversation than they typically receive because they represent something genuinely important. They are one of the last remaining true budget foods that delivers real nutrition at a low cost per serving. But even oats are not immune to what is happening around them. Labor, transportation, and energy prices remain structural concerns across the entire food system in 2026, with truck transportation particularly problematic for long-haul and refrigerated cargo, as truck rates continue to outpace economy-wide inflation. And this has a multiplicative effect on food prices, because trucking is the glue that holds the entire food system together. Oats travel long distances from grain-growing regions to processing facilities, to distribution centers, to your local store, and every mile of that journey now costs more than it did 2 years ago. Buying oats today in large bulk quantities instead of small individual serving packets locks in current prices and saves 30 to 40% per serving. But that window is open right now, and it will not stay open indefinitely. Now step back and look at all 12 products together, because the pattern they form is the real story of this video. Beef prices up nearly 15% year over year. Coffee up more than 18%. Olive oil repriced over 113% from crisis-era lows. Canned tomatoes spiking 40% in a single month. Honey production in structural collapse, with farm gate prices up 27%, and more than half of all U.S. bee colonies dead in a single year. Rice markets volatile and increasingly sensitive to geopolitical disruption. Pasta already 50% more expensive than before the cost of living crisis began. Cooking oils hitting multi-year highs across every variety simultaneously. In a recent national poll, more than half of Americans said everyday life had become less affordable over the past year, and three-quarters of them, 76%, pointed to rising grocery prices as the leading cause, ranking it above gasoline, healthcare, and housing as the #1 financial pressure in their lives. That polling result tells you something critically important. The pain people are feeling is real, it is measurable, and it is being driven by exactly the 12 products we have discussed today. Since 2020, grocery prices overall have increased by roughly 24%, significantly outpacing wage growth for many households, and economists predict grocery inflation could rise to around 4% or higher by year-end 2026 if geopolitical tensions and energy disruptions persist. The families who understand what is driving these numbers and respond with practical, informed action today, building modest rotating stockpiles of the shelf-stable items on this list while prices are still within reach, will be in a meaningfully stronger financial position 6 months from now than those who assume things will correct on their own. As food economist David Ortega stated directly, very rarely do food prices fall, and when they do, it is very short-lived, which is why these disruptions are really concerning. That is not pessimism. That is the documented historical reality of how food markets behave after shocks, and the shocks hitting the system right now are arriving from multiple directions at the same time. You now have the information. The next step belongs entirely to you. If this video opened your eyes to what is quietly happening to the cost of feeding your family, do one thing right now before you scroll away. Hit that like button because it tells us that this kind of real, data-driven content matters to you and pushes us to keep producing it every single week. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell notification so you never miss an update, because the food price situation is moving fast, and we cover it with verified current data, not guesswork or fear-mongering. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these 12 products has already hit your household budget the hardest this year. Because your real-world experience helps this entire community understand what is genuinely happening on the ground right now. Share this video with one person you care about today, a family member, a neighbor, a close friend, someone who is still buying the same groceries without realizing that the cost of feeding their household is being permanently reshaped. And if you want to go deeper, check out our other videos on smart food storage and practical budget preparation. Because the single best time to act is always before the pressure fully arrives. And based on everything the data is showing us right now, that time is today.